Hi, my name is Luke and I am a Visitor Services Officer here at the Tasmania Museum and Art Gallery, and we are currently standing in my favourite room, Medals and Money. Now, I'm the first person to admit the idea of walking through a room full of old coins and medals isn't exactly everyone's cup of tea, but once you learn to disassociate coins with currency and see them for the stories they're trying to tell us, you will fall in love with this room like no other. Now, the room itself spans an amazing 2,500 years of history, starting at ancient Greece, and it goes all the way through to Roman Republic and Empire. We have medieval gold, we have colonial Tasmania and Australia, and up until the 1966 transversion as well. So join us and we'll show you some of our favourite coins and medals.
Okay, so the first coin we're going to talk about today is without a doubt my favourite coin in the entire room. And the reason this is my favourite coin after 360 other coins to choose from is because of the history and the stories it's telling us. Now, we call this coin the Three Sisters testices, and we call that because of the three lovely ladies on the face. Now, these three women are Caligula's three sisters and only direct surviving family members, so he was extremely close to these ladies. Now, on the coin, they're portrayed as the representation of Rome itself, the protectors of Rome, the saviours of Rome, the reason why Rome continues to grow. So they're held in a very high regard. Now, when a museum displays this kind of coin, they usually go for the years 37 to 41 AD. Now, that's the entire time Caligula was emperor, so of course it was made between that. But if we go through a few of the pictures and understand the stories behind them, we can limit that to the first year of his rule. Early 37, early 38 AD. Now, the reason we can come to that date is because the three sisters themselves, there's only one time in Caligula's rule they could be portrayed like this, as the three sisters in favour and happy. Because in the year 38 AD, Drusilla, the middle sister, had died and was then made into a goddess, which means from now on, she's only portrayed by herself. She shares the stage with nobody. The following year, 39 AD, Agrippina and Julia tried to kill Caligula, along with Drusilla's now widowed husband. It's called the plot of the three daggers, and the idea was to kill Caligula and put her ex-husband, or now widowed husband, on the throne. The plot was discovered, he was killed, and Agrippina and Julia were exiled. So no rule is going to make a coin with one dead sister who's now a goddess and two treasonous sisters as the protectors of Rome. So all those clues together, it really comes down to 37 and 38 AD, which is a great example. If you can learn to read the coins, you do get the most amazing history.
Hi, my name is John. I'm a Visitor Services Officer here at TMAG. We're currently in the Medals and Money exhibition. I'm going to talk to you about the Lady Jane Grey testoon. This is a very interesting coin. It was minted under Lady Jane Grey, allegedly, in the year 1553. But it's not until the 1840s that this coin was actually found. The coin was found by Edward Emery, who was a famous coin dealer, and was later convicted for forgery. Once this fact was known, many of these coins were destroyed, and that's why it's a very rare coin today.
Now, one of the oldest coins in the entire room is the Roman Janus As. It's a bit over 2,000 years old, and it's a great idea and a great representation of Rome trying to become a single power. Prior to the god Janus, all the Roman gods were basically Greek gods with a Roman name. They sound fantastic, they're all powerful and well known, but they're not purely Roman. So the Romans invented a god. And if you're going to invent a god, you make him pretty damn powerful. And that's exactly what they did. They made him the god of absolutely everything. He was the god of war and peace, doors opening and closing, beginning and end. His resume was 3 or 4 pages long. Now, if you look very closely at the coin, you can just make out two faces. There's one facing left and one facing right, and that's Janus' singular head. He's always looking to the future and always looking to the past, so you can't get away from this massively powerful being. Now, if you were born under the month of January, your birth month is named after Janus. If you were born under the date or the month, of July, you are Julius Caesar. Now, a very cool story is apparently when Julius Caesar was killed, they wanted to honour him and they gave him his own month. So of course they gave him July, or named it July after him. The problem was though, January had more days than July. So they actually took days out of January, put them into July to make him equal with the god Janus. The calendar we go with today is basically the great-great-great-great-grandchild of Julius Caesar's original calendar. So the great man himself has kept his history throughout time.
One of the most impressive Roman coins in the collection is known as the Julius Caesar elephant Denarius. Now, it's called the elephant Denarius for obvious reasons, but it was minted pretty much at a very important time of the Roman Republic. It's when Caesar had just crossed the Rubicon, breaking all Roman law and taking power. Now, once Caesar got into Rome, he suddenly realized he had a huge army behind him that hadn't been paid in quite some time. He had no money to pay the troops himself, so he ordered some men to go to the local temple of Jupiter, sack all the silver and treasure out of the room, melt it down, and make over 20 million of these silver denarius. Now, the elephant itself is an amazing piece of propaganda because the elephant means power. All great Roman generals and Carthaginian generals and Greek generals have utilized elephants to win the wars. So by putting the elephant on the coin, he's associating himself with these great men, these great rulers. Now, in this particular case, we have a giant elephant trampling a dragon or a winged serpent with the name Caesar underneath. Now, in the ancient days, you had men that spoke Greek and Latin and German and Egyptian and a whole bunch of different languages. So you couldn't rely on writing down a story on the coin. So it all came down to deciphering what the images meant. Now, in this particular case, there is an elephant killing a dragon with Caesar's name underneath. To us, it doesn't say a whole lot, but to the ancients, it's telling you of Julius Caesar's defeat of the German people. The dragon itself was a representation of the Germans, ancient, barbarian, and disgusting. The elephant was noble and powerful. That was Rome, that was Caesar. Another story associated with this particular scene is Pompey Magnus, the arch nemesis of Julius Caesar a few years prior, decided to celebrate a huge triumphant celebration through the streets of Rome. And he wanted to be associated with the great man Alexander the Great himself. So what he did, he organised a huge bunch of elephants to come to the city and to pull him along in a chariot. Now, he had a huge cloak that apparently belonged to Alexander himself. The elephants were outfitted in golden leaf and ivory tusks had been decorated with gems and jewels, and it would have looked absolutely fantastic. The only problem is the man spent no time to actually measure the front gates, and when it came time to start the celebration, the elephants couldn't fit through the entryway itself, and it became a huge laughing stock. So it could also be Caesar's way of laughing at his now arch nemesis, telling people he's not the smartest cookie in the shed, so maybe follow me, not him.
The next coin I want to show you is Claudius Aureus, and on this coin is the Praetorian camp. And that is the barracks for the Praetorian Guards, who are the elite bodyguards to the Emperor himself. By showing the camp on the coin, Claudius is honouring them, but also recognising their own imperial authority as kingmakers, as it was because of them he was emperor. And since then, if you ever wanted to become emperor, you had to have the Praetorian bodyguards on your side, because if you didn't, you'd have a very hard time becoming emperor.
So another very important coin in this room is the silver denarius by Marc Antony. Now, this is known as the Battle of Actium Denarii, and we know that because it was minted in around 31 BC while Marc Antony's troops were wintered just off the coast of Greece. Now, the Battle of Actium itself is considered to be the last full-blown battle of the Roman Republic. It was fought between the forces of Octavian and the forces of Marc Antony and Cleopatra. Now, both men have massive armies, so the army is basically half and half, but one thing they're really shooting for each is the support of Julius Caesar's followers, the idea of Julius Caesar. Now, Caesar is recently dead, so both men are fighting in his honour. And on this coin, Marc Antony is really pushing his association with Caesar himself, not only as one of his best friends, but also one of his leading generals. Now, on one side of the coin, we have a Roman war eagle surrounded by two Roman war flags with the text Leg VI. Now, Leg VI stands for 6th Legion, and the 6th Legion was a legion built by Julius Caesar. So that's Marc Antony's way of saying, I was around when Caesar was doing this. On the other side of the coin is my personal favourite, and it's a giant Roman warship. And that's really showcasing Marc Antony's prowess in battle. Plus, he had Cleopatra's massive naval fleet behind him as well. Now, surrounding the Roman warship, we have the text Ant Aug, which in this case basically says, my name is Marc Antony and I'm an augur, just like Julius Caesar. Now, augur basically means you're a high priest and you can read the signs of the god. So he's showcasing himself along the side of Julius Caesar, who is also a very well-known augur. Now, on the lower part of the coin, we have very small text saying VIRRPC, and very basically that is saying, I am one of 3 men for the restoration of the Republic. So when I win this battle, no more one-man rule, we're going to go back to being a republic and we can get rid of this silly attempted monarchy. Now, that's not true. Marc Antony was vying for power more than most men were himself, but by putting it on the coin here is really going with the Republicans, the men and women as well, who didn't want to go to one-man rule. They wanted to stay the old way of the Roman world. But it's a stunning coin, very rare indeed in this kind of condition, because it was only made in 1 year and was made to be circulated. There was a remint about 300 years later in celebration of the Battle of Actium, and there are a few clues to showcase which coin was the original and which were remade later on. Now, of course, Mark Antony and Cleopatra lost this battle, and a year later were completely defeated by the forces of Octavian. Later he became Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Now, the most important coin in the entire room is the silver holy dollar. We call it the holy dollar for obvious reasons, but the important part about it is it's the most amazing part of Australian history. It's the first official coin of Australia. Now, when they first settled down here in New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land, we didn't have our own currency, so we relied on coins from all over the world. France, English, Spain, silver, gold and bronze. The problem is, when people bought those coins down here, they argued a lot. The gold was worth more here than it is here. We're not getting the best value from this site here as well. So a lot of trouble came about that. Now, Governor Macquarie, to counter those problems, he ordered 40,000 silver Spanish $1 coins, which in itself was still a world currency. Now, 40,000 is a huge amount of coin and more than enough to keep the colony growing. The problem is, because that coin can be spent anywhere in the world, people were going to start taking it out of the colony again. So to counter that problem, he went to the local prison, he found a very famous convict who had been transported for forgery, and he gave him 40,000 coins. And he said, punch a hole in the middle, turn one coin into two. And that's how we get the dollar and the dump. Now, it's pretty smart business. We turned 40,000 coins into 80,000 coins. We had a coin that is now iconically ours, and we had more than enough currency to spread between all the surviving colonies. Now, a few years later down the track, we had more of a unified currency, and we recalled the holy dollars. There was a small reward for every coin bought back. The longer you took it, the longer you waited, the less money you got. So a lot of people bought their silver dollars in quite early, and they were melted down into silver bullion. Now, out of the 40,000 that were given to the convict, roughly 39,990-ish were made into coins, and a few disappeared. Now, the convict claimed they were destroyed during the making of the coin. We're pretty sure we know what happened, and they were pocketed. Now, we know of roughly 300 holy dollars surviving today, which makes it an extremely rare coin, but it's still a coin you have a chance of finding because they have been found on taps, clotheslines and tractors, because people have used them as washers, which means every garage sale, every market you go to, keep an eye out. Go through that jar of pennies, go through that box of stamps, because you don't know where a holy dollar is hiding. Two very interesting coins in the colonial section of our exhibition. We have the cartwheel penny and the cartwheel twopence. Now, they're the first coins made by machine press, so made by steam press, and they were made for two purposes. They were made to be a currency and to be a weight. So if you were buying something in a market and you weren't really trusting the shopkeeper selling you the items, you could use your coin to make sure the weight was correct. Now, the downfall for this particular idea is if you have 8 of those coins in your pocket, that's over a pound of weight by itself. So the people of England weren't very impressed with this idea. So they shipped over 4 tonnes to the colonies of New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land, and that became one of our very regular trade tokens and trade coins. Now, the beautiful side here, we have King George III, and on the reverse we have Britannia, with beautiful ships in the background and the bounty of England showcased there as well. Now, some convicts were actually paid for the work they did, and when they received these coins, they were usually shaved to the front level and had little items of kangaroos or different pictures or love notes shaved and carved into them. And that's what we call convict love tokens, and they become extremely rare because there is only one of each kind. Now, during the Napoleon Wars, there are even stories of some very smart fellows chopping them in half and hollowing the coin out and using that as a smuggling device. So if you wanted to get military secrets across the border or higher grade coins across the border as well, you could fill the coin up with whatever you wanted and easily pass it through the boundaries. There's even some apparently with snuff boxes, again hollowed out and used to carry snuff. They're quite commonly found around whaling stations and other places as well, because when people got very drunk and celebrated, they fell out of pockets quite commonly. They're very rare indeed in this kind of condition because they were circulated a lot during the colonial days. We're very lucky to have quite a large collection in our exhibition here, and these are 2 of the finest examples you'll find.